England is famous for its architecture, from castles, country houses and colleges to museums, churches and the skyline of modern London.
Now, when you think of a building, for example, this church behind me, it tends to be a marriage of function and form. But imagine a world where form is more important than function, or even where form is the function. This is the world of Follies.
In this series, I'll be travelling the length of England looking at 4 of the most significant follies from the last 400 years. Whilst many dismiss these buildings as beautiful whims of the rich, there is a lot more to them than meets the eye. They act as catalysts for architectural innovation and self-expression. They are focal points for literature, landscape and art. And they act as magnets for stories of treason, politics, war and pure eccentricity. In other words, they are portals to the past.
I want to get under the skin of this national cabinet of curiosities and understand why these small, elaborate buildings with apparently no purpose constitute some of England's most interesting architecture. My name is Rory Fraser, author of Follies, An Architectural Journey, and these are my travels.
Traditionally, people tend to think of follies as being 18th century phenomenons. They're kind of temples and landscapes and towers on hills and things like that. And we will see plenty of those later on in the series. But actually, the folly originally is much older than that.
Some of the earliest examples of what we might now call a folly were medieval ruins intentionally incorporated into romantic gardens. Often monasteries and abbeys, they helped remind England of its Catholic past. Then, in the 16th and 17th centuries, people started experimenting with purpose-built banqueting houses that were inspired by the gardens of Renaissance Italy. By far the most exciting example of this can be found deep in rural Northamptonshire in Rockingham Forest, where one man decided to take this formula a step further and build a folly like no other.
Of course, one of the great families around here was the Tresham family, and the Treshams were everywhere. They fought at Agincourt, they were part of the War of the Roses, they were friends with all the kings. They were a sort of pretty big deal.
Born in 1543, Sir Thomas Tresham was no less impressive. In a swashbuckling portrait, we see an intelligent-looking man with a cocked eyebrow surrounded by the things that interested him most. Books, musical instruments, weaponry, but above all a series of Christian symbols that denote a devotion to his Catholic faith. Besides managing his estate and throwing lavish parties at his home Rushton Hall, Tresham's major interest was architecture. In fact, he amassed one of the most impressive collections of architectural books in the country. This coincided with a time of architectural transition, when medieval English buildings were being infused with modern classical styles imported from Europe. This resulted in an impressive new hybrid style characterised by complex roof lines, soaring windows, and a greater sense of symmetry. This was the English prodigy house, a style that lasted around 50 years and has produced some of the most impressive houses England has ever seen. In 1575, the dashing Thomas Tresham was knighted by Queen Elizabeth I and tipped for a position in government to help run her increasingly turbulent state.
And the reason it was such a turbulent reign was because England at that point had decided to become Protestant. And so the country was going through this enormous shift, which divided a lot of people. And unfortunately, one of the main people to fall on the wrong side of this was Tresham and his family, because they refused to become Protestant.